My husband did everything. He said, okay, your money is your money, and my money is our money. And I thought this was pretty good. So I just forgot everything I had ever known.
I mean, one of the rules of the marriage had been that I was closed out from really being knowledgeable about the money that, quote, he was earning. I had an allowance, and so I knew about my allowance. And then when I worked, I added my money to my allowance, but out of which I had to pay all my expenses and basically the household expenses. But I had no idea what the big picture was.
My mind doesn't work that way. He did encourage me to do some investments of my own. I did a minimal. But my brain didn't want to do it, and so I just said, okay. And he did everything.
I had to have an accountant, and she was terribly frustrated with me because I had no idea of how to organize what I needed in order to prepare my tax work. I didn't know what was important, what wasn't important. I was at a total loss, and she couldn't believe that someone who, quote, seemed to be intelligent had no idea of how to manage my financial life.
And then I did what I should have done in the first place and what I would recommend everybody in the world to do, interview a few. I interviewed 3 different advisors who had all been recommended to me.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman. Not Born Yesterday is an award-winning program providing expert advice on issues related to older adults, their adult children, and anyone who works with or lives with elders.
Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village SF, providing services and support to older adults, and the Fromm Institute for Lifelong Learning. I'm Lynn Winter-Gross.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we are examining the phenomenon known as the Great Wealth Transfer. It is believed that almost $90 trillion will be changing hands from the largest and richest generation in many years, the baby boomers. And though some will go to Gen X and millennial children, much of it will be a horizontal transfer, passed within the same generation to spouses or partners. Experts tell us that when the boomer men die, many will bequeath their assets to their wives, who are often younger and tend to live longer, rather than directly to their children. That's trillions of dollars that will have a major impact on wealth management and stock markets.
Before we start examining how surviving partners will change things once they control the money, let's be sure we're ready, willing, and able to take on this important role. While we know that about 1/3 of households, women are in charge of the household finances, almost 2/3 of married women, though, report they really need guidance and support once they take over the checkbook or the online accounts. So today we're going to talk about how to become financially savvy, no matter your gender or your relationship situation. Our guest today is a woman who knows this subject well. Summer Salisbury is vice president and a financial consultant at Charles Schwab and a certified financial planner. Summer, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Excited to talk about this topic.
Summer, let's start at the beginning. A woman is suddenly widowed, and in the midst of grieving, she has to pay the mortgage, taxes, order, and send death certificates to the financial institution. She's got to cancel memberships and even decide which of the many streaming services she wants to keep. Where should someone who's either been avoiding this information or intentionally kept in the dark begin? Should she hire a lawyer to help?
So I think hiring a lawyer depends, right? Every family is different. It really depends on what the prep work has been. And really a lot of what we see and how easy or complicated this transfer can be is kind of dependent on what has been done on the forefront. So kind of talking about, are there beneficiaries? Or do we have to go to probate court, right? Is there a will? Is there a trust? Those are kind of the questions where will we need a lawyer or will we not come in? Also the size of the estate, right? Sometimes people will have a trust that requires new trust to be set up. Maybe the grandkids get portion, kids, spouse, maybe there's three. So I think each family is different. I think the main thing that's important is kind of getting everything done and set up and making sure that you've worked with a lawyer ahead of time to build that trust so that the transition is a lot more seamless and that, yeah, the spouse has someone to contact, right? Do they know who the financial advisor is? Do they know who the CPA is? Have they talked to the lawyer before? And I think having that relationship already existing makes going through this a lot smoother and easier.
Well, sometimes when a partner dies, the remaining person will undoubtedly have a change in her or his financial situation. Many find that they have little savings or money to live on. Others find they have more money than ever, that they have life insurance and pensions and maybe a higher Social Security payment, giving them even more money. So whether you have less or more, what's your best first step?
I think just going back to what we said a little bit earlier, coming up with that plan, right? Really organizing things. I think it depends, right? Some clients who pass away may have accounts all over the place, right? So kind of starting with that organizational piece of figuring out, yeah, where even are the assets before you can even tell kind of where you're at and where you're standing. So I think one thing you can do to really simplify your partner's life and really make things easy is kind of having that communication ahead of time.
I understand, and from what I've read, that women are less risk tolerant than men and often have less self-confidence when it's time to make their financial decisions. I also read that when they do invest, they make different kinds of investments that men do. Is this gender roles? Are these ingrained, or is this something that's new or can change?
And I think that's true, right? Women actually tend to be fairly successful investors, right? They tend to take less risks, but tend to stick to their plan. So I think that's good. They're very pragmatic about what they're doing. Maybe takes a little bit longer to make the decision, but usually once it's made, they tend to stick with it. Everyone is different. To Miriam's point earlier, maybe a client, has less than they thought and they're 60. Right, you have a long time that your portfolio needs to really fund you. So maybe it does make sense to take a little bit more risk in that scenario where maybe I have, more than I thought and I don't need to take that much risk. Maybe I don't need to go through those high ups and downs. And I'm okay just getting a steady return. And if it pays my bills and I'm happy, that's fine. I don't need big declines. But I think that's where it comes to just knowing like every situation is different and they're all unique. It's not necessarily because I'm this age, I need to invest this way.
I was just thinking that perhaps people are worried about outliving their savings and investments, and that makes them less risky. But at the same time, if you just look at the stock market in the last few years, those people who are lower risk takers are losing out on a great financial gain. So how do you balance that?
I think in general, a lot of people tend to pull back, tend to feel like I don't want to take any risk. But yeah, to your point, historically, the stock market has been the best way to beat inflation and being invested. And I think it all just goes back to kind of coming up with that plan, right? If you have a plan, you're much more likely to stick to it versus guessing, right? I find often people will build the portfolio and then make the plan or then try to spend and figure things out. It's much easier to go through and figure out what return do I need and then build based off that.
What about involving your adult children when you become a widow? That could be tricky. It could be a great idea. What is your advice in how to involve your adult children and working with an advisor and your adult children?
I think as an advisor, that's typically pretty beneficial for me. I find often working with adult children who don't know a lot and then could come into, wealth out of nowhere can be a little shocking. But it's a tricky balance, right? I know parents are often concerned, how much do I share, right? They still want them to be motivated, working hard. They themselves have worked very hard. I think just teaching the general knowledge, right? You don't, depending on how close you are with your family and how, everyone gets along, I think it's important to at least, teach the general knowledge, right? I've seen a lot of these portfolios or accounts that are built so well. To your point, maybe the, main breadwinner or main investor was really doing everything all on their own and not really sharing any of the knowledge. So I've had some clients come to me and kind of regret that. They have grown children now, taking things over, and I'm really willing to step in and be the teacher as the consultant. But I think just getting that across ahead of time makes children feel a little bit less concerned, because often what I see is you inherit a portfolio and you feel like, that emotional tie to the investments, right? You trust your spouse, you trust what they did, and making an adjustment can seem, not a betrayal, but it can seem very challenging to make those adjustments. Whereas who knows, maybe that spouse had a specific reason and they were going to sell it in 1 year, right? So you don't really know. So I think having the communication upfront makes things much smoother.
One of the things is we kind of made the assumption that the male is going to die first, and it's the female who's uneducated when it comes to financial things. But it works both ways. Should the woman have to meet with her husband's male financial advisor, who she's never met before, sometimes they find that the men don't really keep them informed. They kind of talk down to them, and the women feel they need to maybe hire a new advisor. So if that happens, what should one look for when they're hiring a new financial advisor?
Yeah, I think that's very common. I just recently spoke with a actually child who, had always been with the parent's advisor. And for the first time, we're thinking, maybe I don't need to be, right? So definitely it's very common. Finding a good fit and someone that you trust is really important, especially when if you feel like, you're maybe not that knowledgeable and you want to learn. As far as going about finding someone, I think just, obviously reputation, word of mouth, talking to people who've had a great experience. I know we get a lot of, clients through referrals, right? They've had a great experience and now they want to really share our information on their own. I think also just going, checking the background, right? You can always go online to broker check. It's just a public website, kind of make sure that, the credentials, how long have they been with the firm, any disciplinary action, anything like that. Just doing your research, but definitely feeling comfortable, I think, is the most important thing.
Widows are often the perfect victim for scams. And we've talked a lot about scams on our podcast, but what about scams in this area and financial areas? And how can we protect ourselves from these scams?
Absolutely. I think we've seen a significant uptick in financial fraud or tricky things that people are doing. So I think definitely going in, always, changing your passwords, dual authentication. I know it can be kind of challenging at first to learn the dual authentication, but it's really, important. I think in general, another really great thing that I think most financial firms have, we definitely have at Schwab, is the verbal password. That can be great to add to your account. It's a specific, unique thing that only you know. It can be really tricky to guess. And so that's kind of verbally something, because I know AI can even kind of copy voices now. There's crazy stuff that's gone on. So if there's something just I think that's important. Another thing is, I think a lot of, just double checking, right? A lot of times, older people will say, I got a call that my son needs money or something like that. It's like, take the extra step. So it may take an extra hour or two to just double check, but it's worth it. So just slow down and kind of, take an extra step to double check yourself.
Could you give us some examples of maybe people who come to you who are completely unfamiliar with financial things and how they feel now that they've talked to a financial advisor? Because some people might think that, I don't have enough money, I don't really need an advisor. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think just starting with that baseline education kind of goes back to working with someone you're comfortable with. Now, I think, hopefully a lot of my clients that I've worked with just from the very beginning feel empowered. I think it depends too, right? Just really being honest with yourself from the beginning. Do you want to learn or do you not, right? There's no shame in not wanting to learn. That's okay, but still being informed, right? What you really need to do at that point, instead of kind of, sticking your head in the sand and just letting it go by, reach out, right? Reach out to someone, hire someone you trust, work with your consultant to find someone that's notable and, has a good reputation. Just be honest, right? Sometimes clients will say, I want to learn. And 1 year later, I haven't seen any changes. And I'm like, I think it's time, we look to, outsource. And if clients are wanting to learn, 100% we're willing to teach, right? I mean, accessibility is something that's really changed in investing over time. You could open an account with $0 now and buy stock slices with $5. So it's really become much more accessible over time. So definitely, if you want to learn, you can, but just be honest if it's not something you're interested in and kind of seek help.
We're assuming that this great wealth transfer is primarily about the boomer age, the boomer generation, and women maybe being less involved with the financial area. Are you finding this is different in other generations, younger generations, or is this pretty well established throughout generations that women leave a lot of the financial investing decisions to men?
I think a lot more women are working in the workplace. So that's changed things, have the 401k, have some advisors through work. But I think, yeah, definitely, accessibility and being able to kind of go online, do your own research, kind of vet things on your own versus word of mouth has really changed the accessibility and opened things up. But I still see it, right? Even just within, my employment, right? Talking to my friends, I think, some of my male friends will talk about their trades they placed and options and things like that. Whereas I don't think my female friends that often talk about it. So definitely something I'm trying to change. And it can be fun, right? You can invest in companies you like. And oftentimes that's what really keeps people interested, right? If it's something you're buying, you hold your Starbucks in your hand or you go to Sephora or something like that, it's a lot more interesting to be investing if it's something you like in a company that you really believe in.
Well, thank you so much for helping all of us become more financially literate. Our guest today was Summer Salisbury of Charles Schwab. Today on News You Can Use, we're talking about a subject that many of us have thought about, but perhaps put on hold for some future discussion: organ donation. Organ donation is, as it sounds, the act of taking healthy organs and tissues from one person and giving them to someone else. It can be challenging to think about organ donation at the end of life, both for the family and the person who's dying. Making and documenting this decision ahead of time is part of advanced care planning, and by registering to donate can help lessen stress during a difficult time.
To answer some of the most common questions about being a donor, we checked in with the National Institute of Health. NIH reminds us that organ donation is an opportunity to help others. People who are on an organ waiting list typically have end-stage organ disease that significantly impacts their quality of life and may be near the end of their life. Receiving an organ can become a life-changing event for these people. It can also help the family of the donor work through the grieving process and deal with their loss by knowing that their loved one is helping save the lives of others.
You can register to be an organ donor at the time you renew your driver's license or state ID at your local Department of Motor Vehicles. You can also register online at organdonor.gov/signup. Very few medical conditions disqualify you from donating your organs. A disease in one organ does not preclude other organs from being donated. The transplant surgeon evaluates the organs and decides whether they are suitable on a case-by-case basis. And there's no age limit for donating organs. You're never too old to make a difference.
So after you sign up to be an organ donor, be sure to tell your family and friends. It's important to let them know your wishes so they can honor your decision at the end of life. Even if it already states this on your driver's license, there's no guarantee that a family member will check that in the important few hours after your death. And be sure to keep the information such as your current mailing address up to date in your state's donor registry. One should be aware that in most cases, organ donation isn't possible if someone dies at home. Vital organs such as heart, lungs, kidneys, and liver are only viable for a short period of time once the oxygen stops flowing through the body. However, eyes and skin can be donated if collected within just a few hours of death.
Most religions accept the concept of organ donation. Some believe organ donation to be an act of charity. If you don't know where your faith stands on organ donation, ask a member of your clergy. And if you've been thinking about organ donation, it may be time to check out the online registration or the Department of Motor Vehicles in your state.
And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks to our guest, Summer Salisbury of Charles Schwab. You can check out the programs of Next Village at their website, nextvillagesf.org, and learn more about the Fromm Institute at fromminstitute.org. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstedt is our engineer. And we thank you for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discuss and discover. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All of these are free and help us to know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.